Title: Star Wars: The Kick That Took Down Captain Rex. The mission begins. The humid air of Felucia clung to Captain Rex's armor as he marched forward, his DC-17 blaster pistol at the ready. The 501st had been deployed to secure an outpost near a small farming village. Nothing too complicated. Intel suggested that the Separatists had been using the settlement to smuggle supplies, but so far, the mission had been uneventful. Behind him, ARC Trooper Fives and Jesse walked in formation, scanning the tree lines. "Why does the Republic care so much about some farmers and their livestock?" Jesse muttered. "Beats me," Fives shrugged. "Guess Command thinks there's more to it." As they entered the village, the troopers were greeted by nervous farmers and the occasional bantha or eope tied to wooden posts. The smell of damp earth and animal dung was thick in the air, but Rex hardly noticed. His focus was on the mission. That focus, however, would soon be shattered in the worst way possible. A fatal misstep. Near the center of the village, a makeshift wooden fence enclosed a small paddock of livestock. Among the penned animals stood a handful of ordinary dirt-brown horses, large, muscular, and restless. Their tails swished irritably at flies as they shifted in the mud. Rex barely paid them any attention. That was his first mistake. The captain stepped too close to one of the animals, walking just behind it as he scanned the area for threats. Without warning, the horse's ears pinned back. Its massive frame tensed. Then, crack! A thunderous explosion of force slammed directly into Rex's stomach. The sheer power of the kick was indescribable. It drove straight through his armor, the reinforced plastoid plating buckling inward like cheap tin. The air in his lungs was instantly obliterated, his diaphragm crushed under the pressure as if an entire starship had landed on his gut. The impact sent shockwaves of agony through his torso. His ribs didn't just break, they detonated. The bones snapped, splintered, and drove inward, piercing muscle and possibly puncturing his organs. The sheer velocity of the kick launched him off his feet. Fives and Jesse barely had time to react before Rex's body ragdolled through the air, flipping backward before slamming into the mud with a sickening wet thud. What happened next was far worse. A horrifying scene. Rex's body twitched violently, his legs barely responding. A deep, wet gurgling came from inside his helmet. Then, he vomited. The sheer force of the kick had violently emptied his stomach, sending a wave of thick, acidic bile surging up his throat. His body convulsed as his helmet's interior splattered with half-digested ration paste, stomach acid, and bile. But the helmet was still sealed. The vomit had nowhere to go. "Oh, Criff!" Jesse gagged as Rex began to choke. The captain's body seized up, his limbs flailing weakly as his own sick flooded his nose and throat. His body instinctively tried to inhale, but instead of air, he sucked in a thick, burning mouthful of his own vomit. A horrific, wet, gagging sound crackled over comms. "Get his helmet off, now!" Fives shouted. Jesse stumbled to his knees, frantically grabbing at the helmet's release latch. But Rex was jerking violently, his body starved for oxygen. His fingers twitched, his stomach still convulsing. The interior of the helmet had turned into a suffocating, vomit-filled death trap. His muffled choking grew fainter. His movements slowed. Come on! Jesse gritted his teeth, finally yanking the helmet free. A flood of bile spilled out, splattering onto Jesse's gloves and the mud below. Rex's face was pale, his lips tinged blue. His breaths came in shallow, desperate gasps, his eyes unfocused. "Medic! We need a medevac!" Fives shouted into his comms, his voice frantic. "This is 501st Squad Orek. Urgent medical emergency! Captain Rex is down! Repeat, Captain Rex is down! He's got spinal damage, broken ribs, possible internal bleeding. He's not breathing right. We need a gunship for immediate evac. There was a brief pause before the comms crackled. Copy that. Squad Aurek. Medical evac en route. Hold tight. Rex barely heard them. His vision darkened, his mind drifting as the pain became distant, almost hollow. Then, everything faded to black. Evacuation and aftermath. Minutes later, a Lay-8 gunship roared overhead, its searchlights cutting through the darkening sky. Medics rushed out, stabilizing Rex as best they could before loading him onto a stretcher. The last thing Fives and Jesse saw as the gunship lifted off was their captain, unconscious, his body barely holding together. They never expected a normal horse to nearly take down the greatest soldier in the 501st. But there it was,